So that's the next release, in this case 1.5. The second part is a general Q&A discussion of odds and ends. People can give feedback. We'll take some of that feedback and actually roll it into the release if we have time. And then the last part, the last few minutes of the meeting, I like to save for what's coming up in the next release, so everybody can kind of get a feel for the direction that the team is going and what we're going to be focused on for, in this case, 1.6. Does that sound good? All right. So I'll dive right in. So we're gonna run through 1.5 and kind of the features, what's changed from 1.4 and so forth. Because we've got enough folks on this call, I'll say we'll hold questions until we get through the demo period, and then we'll kind of do a break and open it up for questions. All right, so I'm going to go ahead and start up Operator on my local machine. And here we go. So the very first thing that you're going to notice when you open up Operator in the 1.5 version is that it looks different. So we have a designer now, Robert, and he's on the call. I believe he will introduce himself in just a little bit. But he's been doing some work tweaking designs and making things just overall feel better and more readable and so forth. And so you're going to see just a general new skin, still dark themed, but you'll notice new icons and all that sort of stuff. A large motivation for some of these bigger changes that you're going to see in 1.5 is to push us into a more operational mode. So up until from operator beta versions, our 0.9 all the way up until now, one of the things that we've been shooting for is to get in all of the basic functionality that we wanted to get into a command and control center. And now that we hit the 1.4, we got in everything we wanted to from a large functionality standpoint. And now we're starting to do that big shift into, okay, let's rearrange kind of the pieces as if they're just pieces on a board, and let's make this tool as powerful as we can. And so 1.5 is kind of the first big shift here. And so a lot of the changes we've rolled in are designed to be helpers for UX and kind of the flow that a red or purple teamer or a blue teamer in a lot of cases is going to go through while doing their job. And so you'll see that's kind of the focus, if you will. All right, the first thing that you'll see on the, I'll kind of work through the left to right here. The very first thing you'll see on the left nav bar is it's going to be rearranged a little bit and a little bit cleaner. And so the only option you're going to see at the top is Connect. And this is the same Connect plugin that you're used to seeing in 1.4. It is getting a little bit of a makeover for 1.5, but that'll be the only icon that you see at the top. Down here, you'll see training, documentation, activity, which is new, and settings, which I think is called account in 1.4, if I'm not mistaken. The good thing, or the new thing about the nav bar is nothing you click here is going to take you to a new section anymore. Everything inside of Operator has been tweaked so it's a single section application, and that's kind of gives us an easy way to maintain state throughout the app. And so you're always kind of in the same state. And so if I open these up, such as training, you're going to get the training sidebar. So instead of this taking you into a section, it's going to pop you directly into the training section in sidebar view. And you can start flipping through. I'll just grab one of these. And you'll see the same kind of, or the similar type of training flag design here, redesigned slightly to fit into this sort of interface. But you can go through the training programs from here. One of the things you'll notice is we have slimmed down to 2 training programs built into Operator. Introduction. All the courses have been kind of realigned to fit with the changes for 1.5. This intro program takes you through, obviously, the Operator app and teaches you how to use it. Pink Badge is the second program, and this is designed toward IT professionals that want to get into offensive security or cybersecurity in general. And so those are our 2 programs. And I'll talk toward the attack procedure program that used to be in here, and that still lives on, but it's in a new location. And I'll show that in just a minute. So this is training. Close that down, and I'll open up docs. Similar to training, this opens up in a modal kind of sidebar. The training went through obviously a nice little revamp as well. And so this opens you up into the same doc page, or very similar doc page as you would get today if you opened up docs in 1.4, except now you have search capability, and the search will allow you to search AWS. The search will allow you to search for any kind of keyword and get all of the doc pages that are relevant to that. And so just searching for AWS, and I can get the data on AWS with a highlight of where my search was hitting. So hopefully this will give you a quick way to find things and to kind of flip through documentation. You can probably see here when I did this search that there are some TTP man pages. So you can see these doc pages here. I'm going to click on one. So the attack procedures program that used to be in training has been reworked into documentation. And so this documentation is now available in the community GitHub repository online. So if you go there into the doc section or the doc directory on that repo, you'll find all of this documentation. So it's all in one place, and it gets loaded into Operator when you start up Operator. We load in the doc pages and make that available. Part of those doc pages are these attack procedure program flags. So where this used to be a training program in 1.4, these have been converted into essentially manual pages that you can use from within Operator to learn about different TTPs. So in this case, I just pulled up a single one about users, finding out users on AWS. And you can get a lot of information. A lot of this is pretty rich content around all firsthand that people here at Prelude have written about different chains and different TTPs, hoping to spread more information and knowledge about what you're actually running on your machines. And so you can search for any keyword that you want, just search for password, and find any TTP that works with passwords that we have a man page for, pull them up, and start working through what that actually means. So this is the new documentation section. Just to highlight this a little bit, because I want this part to sink in. If you go onto GitHub into community, this is where I was chatting about just a sec ago. This is a new directory, docs. And here are our man pages here and all of the regular operator documents here. All right, so moving down, the next sidebar is activity. Activity is, you can kind of open this up in our first version in 1.4 with a control plus L keyboard shortcut. Will open up something similar in 1.4. This is a stream essentially of what's happening within your operator instance from the system side. And so every time that something happens that is, say, an event, you schedule an adversary, a new agent connects in, procedures get downloaded. They pop in here in what's now a text message stream, and you're going to see them coming in with a timestamp and the fact that they're reports from your system. This is an added, looks like a text message box because this is also part of our enterprise license, where if you are connected to your teammates, which is one of the enterprise features, you can connect Operator to your teammates. You can actually use this to chat with people. And so you can see which one of your teammates are online. You can chat with folks, and now you have essentially a self-hosted encrypted chat channel that runs completely through your redirectors. So when you deploy a redirector, you now have that encrypted chat channel. You can communicate only via that if you'd like. So this is a whole new thing coming out in 1.5. Closing down activity. Settings went through the least amount of changes from what it looks like. It's definitely cleaned up quite a bit. So you get your count settings here. A couple of changes if you did a comparison, but for the most part, the same functionality. You have general settings, which is mostly what network settings is in 1.4. We added sections to make it a little bit easier to understand what settings go to what parts of the application. So API settings, listening posts for agents, and so forth. One subtle change is that the API token is now mutable. You can change this to whatever you want, save it. Up until now, it has rotated on every restart of Operator. Now you can actually change it and make it a static string to whatever you want. Over in agent settings, we've trimmed this down to just encryption keys. So this is our default encryption key. This will look the same for you in 1.4. The things we took out were the multiple encryption options that you could select. Now all encryption methods are selected by default. And those are AES 256, base 64, and plain text. That's in the documentation if you look up the agent page, but we just leave those on by default to make this a little bit easier to understand. And then you can just add or remove the keys that you want here. Down below, you have archived agents. This doesn't exist in 1.4. This is a new thing. In Operator now, in 1.5, anytime you delete an agent, it won't actually delete. It will automatically archive it and put it in this spot. This gives you the ability to then go back and either restore it or permanently delete it. And then the last section here is plugins. Plugins went through a pretty big change. Lewis, are you on the call? Wasn't sure.
Yeah, sorry guys, I just joined.
Perfect. All right, then I will skip plugins for now and come back to that in just a minute because that's a bigger one.
Sounds good.
Or better, Lewis will come back to that in just a minute. All right, so that is our nav bar, kind of the changes you'll see there. Going into the second of the three sections here, the middle area. So we kind of refer to this in the code as the range. And so what you'll notice is there is no more range dropdown. You can set a plain text search. So you can search for any text for any agent that you would want to just do a search on. So basic kind of search filter there. There's a couple other advanced things you can that are in the docs. Like if you wanted to search based on range, you could do that. Platform, you do that. So there's a couple of odds and ends you can do, but for the most part, that's just a search filter instead of the dropdown. For each agent, instead of showing the icons in the top area here like we do in 1.4, we broke those down under the agent. And so as you click on an agent, you'll get essentially all the same options, but they'll be either enabled or disabled based on what's available for that given agent. So going through these options, you have launch chain. This one probably has the biggest amount of functionality change that you'll get in 1.5. This gives you the ability you're going to see the most recently deployed chain that we have. So this is tied directly to TTP Tuesday. And so if you click on the learn more, this will take you out to our TTP Tuesday site, and you can read a little bit more detail and see some of the attachments and so forth. Alternatively, you can go ahead and again use the search feature in order to, I'll pull up File Hunter because we do that a lot. You can search for any TTP or chain in your system and pull it up this way. And so when you pull it up here, you're going to get essentially a little bit of a beefed up version of what we do in 1.4 in terms of what you're viewing. So you can view all the TTPs in your chain. You can create copies, create new chains. You can keep appending to this chain just by attaching things. You can kind of see it grow. You have to enable if you have a destructive TTP. You can remove TTPs that you don't want on your chain. You can lock your chain, which allows you then to reorder it in whatever order you want it to go in. You can delete it if I had created it. I haven't created it yet, so I can't delete it. You can rename it. You can give it a new summary. All of these things are editable. And then when I'm happy with it, I can deploy it. Alternatively, I can back out and head back to this screen. So I'll go back in and run another small thing. All right, so just pulling up a quick ERP scan. You can click on any of these TTPs in your chain to open up the editing capability. And so what we're giving you now are the full YAML files that you can adjust in whichever way that you want. From within here, you can attach payloads. And this will allow you to pick any payload that you want. And you can see it's saved, and that's my payload. It also added the payload right here into my metadata to let me know that it is available to use. In a similar way, I can create new TTPs with this first option that will pop open the search, and it will build the scaffolding for a TTP, and you can adjust whatever you want to adjust in order to continue building. And it will add that automatically to your chain, and now you can kind of flip through your different TTPs on your chain pretty quick. All right, when you deploy, you have two options. You can either deploy, and this will deploy the chain that you have selected against your agent that you're currently looking at, or you can click on the advanced option, and this is going to give you the ability to expand your deployment out to the entire range. It's also going to allow you to attach additional chains to execute after this one. And so if you wanted to say, do the ransom note, for example, after this one, you could do that. Or if you want to do a full ransomware, you could do that. And you can attach as many chains as you want to run after this one. There's also a basic scheduler that will allow you to delay this deployment for n number of minutes. And as I'm making modifications, if you keep your eye on the API command, you'll see that this will adjust based on your selections here. So you can just click on this to copy it, and this will take it. Now it's on my clipboard, so now I can actually pop this and run this entire thing over an API if I wanted. Now, if I don't want to schedule it, so I could schedule it if I do that. Otherwise, I'll pop basic deployment and I'll just run it. And you'll see things running in the background up here. And we're off and running. So when I pop back into my result view, this is the third and final section that I'm going to cover. So from this view, you're going to get a much more streamlined view and a lot more options than the result table we give you today. So the search is kind of the same at face value. And so you can search for anything in your results that you want to search for. But as you kind of scan over with the mouse on the result canvas, if I wanted to see every TTP that uses the SH executor, all I have to do is scan over it. If I click it, it's now going to build a filter for me automatically and filter my results. That works for about everything in here. And so you can see this was run by me, so I could filter down to only things that were run by my email address. You can also see groupings of what ran within the same operation. And all of these are clickable. If you want to say just do this one operation and see what my start to finish looked like, you can do that. And so this allows you to quickly work your way through the results. All right, moving down this range sidebar. The last two items, or there's three more items I'm going to show, I guess. The first one will be my profile. This is pretty much all the same options that you'll get in 1.4 laid out much differently. At the top, you're now going to see the locked and unlocked capability. Locked is when you require approval to send any instruction to an agent. Similar to 1.4, just a little bit hopefully more intuitive here. And then there's a new mode that is called simulation. And simulation mode will never send an instruction to this agent if you leave it in simulation mode. You can see the icon has changed over here. Instead of sending the instruction, what operator will do is it will attempt to simulate what the result would look like if you were to send it to that agent. So that will allow you to sample the chains that we push out or any chain that you build with an operator to try to get a good feel for what it would look like in a real environment before you actually run it in that real environment. This is an area that you'll have hit or miss success on because we don't have it works off of simulated responses. And so if this is an area of interest, definitely reach out to us and we'll walk you through how to get the most out of this, but expect this feature to become more and more powerful over time. Then last but not least in this section, you've got facts. And so facts work the same as they have in 1.4 with a couple adjustments. The first one is this table is now paginated and search format than the slowness if you have a lot of facts in prod today. The second thing you'll notice is if I add something new, any fact that I put in can be scoped to either the agent the range that the agent is in, or every agent. And I'll switch this one to global. Global is a new scoping that we're putting in for 1.5, which means that if I flip over to another agent that I have, and I view its profile, you can see it also has that fact. Now, some of these facts, such as this one, are not deletable. That is because this agent does not own this fact, so it cannot delete it. It's a global fact it's inheriting elsewhere. But if I go back to the owner, I can see this one is editable and deletable. Something to keep in mind. And then Q is the same as it was in 1.4, so nothing new here, but just note where it is. And then the last thing is also a big thing. This is agents. And so instead of going into the editor section, which is not in here, you'll notice, and downloading the agent from payloads, the agent downloads are now available right here. And so you can scan through all your available agents with the toggles. And for any of them, you can click on it, and it will open you up a variety of options to install the agent. And so if you look at these, they're per operating system. Similar to the API command I showed before, this is going to give you the download and execute command for each agent. So you can copy this and then go ahead to any other computer and execute this, assuming you point it to something that is the correct IP address. But this will allow you then to just quickly paste it in and run it. And you can see my agent is now popping in. And this one has a reverse shell and delete option because it is a NUMA agent. All right, with that, now I'm going to pivot over to Lewis. Lewis, would you mind taking us through plugins?
Yeah, let me see if I can share my screen. It might not be possible. Okay, it's not letting me because I need to quit and reopen, unless you want to just work off your screen share, David, which might be easier.
You can give me a second to grab it back.
Sorry about that. Yeah, so plugins got a fairly significant change. Rather than each plugin having its own UI and everything like that we have in current operator, which allows plugins to obviously have like a canvas of their own. We've opted to basically make plugins backend only. So now when you toggle a plugin on, it'll do all that it does behind the scenes. So right now David has the art plugin installed without any sort of user intervention at all. The art plugin has gone ahead, downloaded all the art plugins, or all the art TTPs, as well as all the payloads associated with them, so that when you load them up into an operation, even though we can't interpolate the actual payload into the Atomic Red Team TTPs themselves, you should have a lot more at your grasp than we currently do today. On top of that, what used to be a single publisher plugin is now broken apart into each of the independent publishers that we're looking at supporting. So there's a Splunk publisher, which if you toggle the settings on, you can enter the same parameters that you required before, just in a much more streamlined and a much more lightweight interface. And again, when you toggle on and off, it'll just do all the things that it's supposed to do behind the scenes. We have the ability to launch an HTTPS listener, which is care of Alex. Allows you to post a HTTPS listener on any port you want, configure it dynamically from here. This is a big pivot from where we had before, where the only way you could get SSL terminated connections was by standing up HA proxy in front of a redirector. So having it built in native or not built in native, but having it available as a plugin inside your local operator instance hopefully adds a lot more convenience for people, as well as the ability to do things in a way they couldn't really before. And yeah, we've also added support for Vector and Dynamo as additional publishers that we also didn't have before. So a lot of improvements coming across the board for that whole area. But that's basically it for publishers. Took a big pivot, made it a lot cleaner, a lot simpler, and hopefully a lot easier to use.
Perfect. All right, Alex, I'm going to go over to you now and take us through agents.
Yep, I will share screen. I've got some stuff ready as well. Gotta find the one that's desktop. Screen 2. Perfect. Go live. All right, let me know if you can see it. Can you see it?
Yep, you're good.
Cool. All right. So I'm going to start here and just kind of talk at a high level about what we're doing on the agent side. And then I'm going to talk through some of the agents that we've been working on, as well as turn it over to Roger so he can talk a little bit about our new flagship open source agent. So at a high level, our agent strategy kind of is underpinned by 4 primary areas. We want them, 1, to be easy to use, 2, to be effective, 3, to be resilient, and then 4, to be evasive, obviously. In that vein, we're breaking out our agents into 3 different tiers. So at the community level, we're always going to have one open source agent, and we're actually replacing Numa, and Roger is going to talk a little bit about that. So I'll hand it over to him in a moment. For our professional license holders, we are going through each of our script-based kind of stage 1 type agents, and we're doing overhauls to make sure that they are effective and resilient. So we will have, at the professional level, 1 script-based agent per platform, and I will talk through each of those after this. And then at the enterprise tier, our plan is to support a single closed source, much more fleshed out, thorough agent. And currently in the backlog of what we're going to be doing is think like Linux eBPF kernel rootkit would be enterprise tier type agent. So the first one we're going to talk about is our replacement for Numa, which we are calling Invader NIM. So I'm going to turn it over to Roger to discuss a little bit about what Invader NIM is and what he designed here.
Yep, everyone. So, Vader NIM is a modular implant written in the NIM language. And if you're not familiar with NIM, it's just a C transpiler. So it walks and talks like Python, but it compiles to C. So we can do a lot of fun memory unsafe stuff like dynamically loading in modules. And this agent is really built around that idea. What we want to do is load stuff only when we need it. So, for example, if we want to switch our transport from, let's say, TCP or UDP, rather than shipping with all of that code, we can just make a request for the UDP module, load it in, and fire off our beacon. And that type of pattern applies to all of the executors and everything we've seen in our previous agents as well. Along with some new stuff like the keyword executors for, let's say, execute assembly or beacon object files, BOFs, or anything else we want to put in there. So that's the core idea, lightweight, fully modular. Oh, and you can compile in the modules at compile time. So if you know, like upfront, you maybe don't want to load stuff dynamically, you just only want like, a set of particular features. You can set command flags during compile and build that out. So that's the idea. Should be out pretty soon.
Awesome. So one thing we also will have at the community level that I brought up, but I forgot to mention, is we are now going through the process of doing native built-in support for other C2 framework implants. So the first one that we have gone through and added is extending out that listener pattern to support sliver plugins. So I actually have sliver implants, I should say. So I actually have a really quick demo just to show what that looks like before we jump into the professional level. So as with any standard agent, you can just go into Sliver, right now only supporting MTLS transport protocol, but you can directly connect your Sliver implants into Operator, and then they will walk and talk the same way that a standard agent for like Numa or any of our script-based agents would work. This is building off the same kind of listening post technology that the HTTPS listener uses. So we can then extend the listeners inside Operator to essentially support any other protocol. And then from here, you can do the same kind of commands. and essentially task them the same way you would a standard agent. And that will then get rendered back into your operator experience. One of the benefits of this is we're actually able to leverage more advanced execution methodologies that are implemented inside of these agents. So we do have stuff like execute assembly, where you can actually call a donut shell code and render those bytes into a task that would go to the agent. So you would be able to do execute assembly through operator and tasking an agent like Sliver, for example. So this will be available in the community tier with 1.5 as well. Moving on, at the professional tier, we're going to have 3 script-based agents. So we're going to have one written in Python that is primarily geared towards Linux systems, but obviously written in Python so that it can support multiple platforms. We're going to have one written in JXA, which is JavaScript for automation, targeting Mac OS X systems, Mac OS systems, I should say. And then we're going to have a third one, which is Jambi, and that is, I should say, written in PowerShell. So these 3 agents are all modular script-based agents, similar to the way NIM is designed. So they will be very small scripts, and then only load in modules to execute as needed during runtime. We're right now in the process of going through each of these agents in order to upgrade them and get them ready for real usage out in the more complicated environments that our customers have. So this is it from the agent side. David, would you like me to quickly hop into the chain side?
Yes, definitely go for it.
Okay. So also, the security engineering team on the other side has been working on Prelude attack chains. So what we've been doing over the past few PSIs is working on different themes. This particular PSI, which is 6 weeks long, we're focusing on APT 29. So the idea with APT 29 is we're taking a look at APT 29 holistically and specifically going through their past attack chains and building discrete kill chains to represent their growth as a threat actor over time and the techniques that they've developed as they've progressed through different attacks over the years. So far, we have released the Pentagon attack and the DNC attack, and we will have coming up over the next 4 weeks the US think tank NGO attacks, Operation Ghost, their attempts to do COVID-19 vaccine data exfiltration, and their hacks against the RNC as well. So this is the kind of the content chain delivery side that we are doing in addition to the agent development side. And that is it from the security engineering side. Back to you, David.
Perfect. We've got 2 more sections for all you guys on the phone. We've got connect and some design and pre-release information. So those are our last 2 sections. So let me share screen again. All right, and back into operator. All right, so in the same operator here, what I didn't cover in the prior quick rundown was connect. I wanted to save that for a separate piece, which is right now. So connect is the one piece that won't be going out in the pre-release build this week, but it will be coming next week. It'll drop into it'll drop into your app next week as a plugin. So you'll be able to get access to it then. Connect itself operates very similar. You'll notice when you click on it, it's going to pop you into a right sidebar with similar options that you have today. If you click to connect any given redirector that you have, it's going to give me a variety of options, but then you get to see my agent count went up, probably doubled, as all of my agents that are terminating at the redirector are now available inside of my operator. And so as I toggle this on and off, my agents will become either available or not available to my local operator instance. So the way to view connect, and we do it this way already today, but we're making a shift in some of the UX to try to get people in more of the habit of how to use connect in the way that it's designed. think of Connect as your remote. Think of Connect giving you the capability of remote controlling a headless operator instance in the cloud. And so when you use Connect, what you're doing is you're provisioning a new redirect inside of your either AWS or GCP account. And that is essentially giving you a pivot point in your own cloud environment. And then when you connect to that redirector, you now have the ability to manage that cloud infrastructure from your local operator instance. Everything that comes into your everything that comes into your redirector and hits that from an agent perspective, it terminates at that point, and then your local operator instance as a remote controller is allowed to essentially work against that data, the agents, the TTPs, the whatever you have within that environment. As you can see here, I connected and now have access to agents that are terminating at that redirector location. That's the last bit I've got on Connect. All right, with that, I'm going to pivot it into our last section for today, which is design and pre-release information. So, Robert, if you wouldn't mind taking the wheel.
Definitely. Thanks, David. So, hello. Like David said, my name's Rob. I haven't done an official intro on Discord yet, so don't feel bad if you haven't heard of me or talked to me or anything. I think I started about 6 weeks ago, potentially even 8. We've been so busy that I've already lost track of time entirely. Just to give you some background on me, it's been kind of a mishmash of agencies, product startups, and a handful of bigger named enterprise companies that we all know and mostly don't like all that much. But I've been in the tech space as a designer for over 20 years. But this is actually my first time working within the security industry at all. So I'm stoked to be here and looking forward to learning from, honestly, all of you. But one of the things we're going to start doing from here on out is working in some testing cycles before releases, which is why I'm here talking to you all right now. We're still solidifying some of the details, but the general plan is to grab maybe 10 of you with professional licenses who would be interested in helping us test stuff. And that will result in you getting 1.5 pre-release for about a week, maybe a little more, depending on how it goes. I would just need you to use it as normal, give me some feedback as you use it, probably just on Discord. Try not to be too formal about that. Could be a DM in a channel, whatever. As long as it's easy enough for me to track, it'll be fine. Maybe we just try to leverage the professional channel for this. Kind of play that by ear, I think. Then at the end of that, it'd be great if you could just write up a quick summary of your experience. Maybe a paragraph, 2 paragraphs, however much you feel like writing. Just kind of about what worked, what didn't work, how it felt, how it should feel, how it should work. Totally feel free to be absolutely opinionated. You don't need to be too strict about it or anything. You can just casually write up how you feel, and I'm going to take that, digest it, and we're all going to get together and kind of see what the general consensus from everyone is, and some of that feedback, honestly, might get into the 1.5 release in a few weeks. So, I mean, it could be a pretty quick turnaround before you actually see your insights go straight into the product. So it should be a lot of fun. And that's kind of it for me, I think. I think the next steps would be maybe just ping me if you're interested in testing on Discord, in a channel, DM, whatever works for you. And we'll kind of compile a list of people who are interested and take it from there and figure it out.
Perfect. And I'll hop in there and say, if you've already expressed interest in the 1.5 pre-release, you don't have to redo it. Robert already will have those names. And so only if you haven't looked for the 1.5 release yet, definitely let us know. In terms of dates and times, expect Robert to drop in some information tomorrow on kind of the solidified plan that we have for this feedback session period. And then expect also at some point tomorrow for the pre-releases to start being distributed. All right, with that, opened up for questions. Anybody have anything they want to ask or chat through?
Yeah, I actually have a question.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, so I remember we talked about how you guys were gonna change how TTPs parse out information.
Mm-hmm.
So I don't know. I don't think I caught you saying anything about that.
That is a great question. Let me share my screen to show that, because that is a nuance that is quite important in terms of people's ability to understand how to do parsing. So you should be able to see my screen, right?
Yep.
All right. So if I look at, I'll actually show it from the release notes, because it's written down so you can actually read what I'm talking about. So if I look at the release notes, the one I'm going to look at is this paragraph here, the 1, 2, 3, fourth one from the bottom. All right, so by default, as we are parsing out facts, so as you run TTPs, the results of those TTPs get automatically parsed out for indicators of compromise. Now in 1.5, we are going to parse out the indicator of compromise only. So it will show up sort of like this. If we parse out a file, it will look like this. If we parse out a directory, it would just be directory. And that's it. Now you'll be able to utilize those indicators of compromise, those facts, in 3 different ways. You could utilize it as simply, or I guess 4 different ways, as simply this as the variable inside of your TTP. And if you use this as the variable, then, pound brackets and file in this case, then what you're saying is I want to use any file from any previous TTP. If you do this as a variable inside of your TTP command, what you're saying is I only want to use files discovered from discovery tactics in the past. This one gets a little bit more specific, and this says, hey, I want to only use files that were found by a particular technique being executed. And then last but not least, it is you can direct the indicators of compromise from a particular TTP into your current TTP by utilizing this version, which is saying, hey, I want to take files that were found by this particular TTP only. And so now you've got a variety of options when it comes to facts. And our default is going to be kind of your most wide open catch-all, which is just using an indicator of compromise. So you can now kind of sprinkle those into your commands, and those variables will be automatically resolved as you're running TTPs.
Okay, thank you.
Yep. Other questions?
Yeah, I have a couple, but I don't want to hijack, so I'll scatter them through the rest. I do like the way that you changed the editor, that you just got the YAML. Since we already built all our stuff, our custom stuff also in YAML, I think the imports will be significantly easier. The one thing that I wanted to check is now if you submit a payload, you do stuff to it, right? So I can't just import it directly or export it directly anymore. Is that changed? Is the behavior changed of the engine behind it, or is it just a representation that?
As far as exporting the payloads?
Well, yeah. It's less important, but whenever I import a payload now, I think you encrypt it or encode it or do something
yes.
to it.
Yep. Good question. Yeah, so that's the same. So you'll have the same encryption that happens. The same import and export process is still relevant. So everything payload-wise will be backward compatible from 1.4 to 1.5. There are a couple changes that you'll see within the TTP in terms of how we use it that you'll want to be aware of. So the payloads themselves are the same, but what we are doing in 1.5 is you'll see that payloads are now, as I import payloads, and I can import them, by the way, right here, or I can import them over the API. We added a endpoint that you can just start doing bulk payload uploads on.
Epic, I like that. Yeah.
Thought you like that one.
That was an annoyance on the previous release. It's took some workarounds.
One of these 2 ways, and when it comes in and you add it to a TTP, like I did in this case, you'll see that it will get added to your metadata, and it will show you this is your payload name, and here's the SHA-1, so you can see what the hash resolution is. And then from that point forward, you can just use this one uses it, you can just use the payload name at that point. So before you had to do operator, the operator payloads variable like this.
Okay.
So you no longer have to do that, you just have to reference the name that matches the metadata. And then we check to make sure that the hash is the correct one, and then that's the one we serve.
Awesome. And this hash is the hash of the encrypted one or the ingested one?
This is the non-encrypted one, right, Lewis?
Yeah, it's the whole purpose of that is so that we can deduplicate the payloads and uniquely identify them. We were running into, even internally, having name collisions on on payloads before. So having the checksum as well as the name allows us to make sure that you'll never have any sort of conflicts or anything like that. And it allows you to have multiple versions of the same payload running different TTPs if you want to do that, without having to worry about any sort of like backwards compatibility between things, because everything is uniquely identified. So yeah, but yeah, to answer your question, the checksum is on the raw binary, so you'll be able to calculate that offline without having to worry about what the encrypted stuff looks like after the fact.
Sweet. So would it also be able to get that out as a, I don't know, a tag or a metadata field in the running of these? So once you deploy it, it would be nice to have that in the log for some reason. So the reason I ask is I build a custom plugin to write to Azure Sentinel, and I do correlation based on all the events automatically. But knowing what the hash of the executed file is might give me some additional triggers to do some correlation on.
Yeah, that sounds like something we could probably add to the link metadata after it's been run.
It will be nice.
Olaf, there's actually a couple things I forgot to mention that you'll probably like in here that are smaller nuances. There's a bunch of these kind of really powerful things, but only have so much time. So let me show two of them. So one of them is you are building your chains out. You can actually, let me give a better example than this one. I'll pull up a simple one because it'll be easier to understand. So let's say I'd run File Hunter. If I can spell it right. And say I want to run this as a chain, except I want to also, when it finishes, I want to run it again. So you can actually start running it multiple times, and you can duplicate TTPs in the same chain, or you can run the same chain one after the other. So that's kind of thing one.
Nice.
Thing two is we don't have this built into the UI now for 1.5. So this will be a backend only change that you can toy around with if you want to start getting a feel for it. But if you are familiar with variants, we have a little bit of a treat in here. So let's see, what's one offhand? Thought I just had one up in Zombie. Let me look. Yeah. Okay, so here we go. Here's variants. And so you can see in this case, we have a variant. These are all the same as in terms of structure on the TTP. We want to make sure things are back compatible as we hop the versions. But as you're building your chain now, if you go into, and I'll do this manually, if you go into workspace, and your workspace is the installation directory of Opera, which I think most people will be at least familiar with, and you go into your chains directory, I'll just open one of my chains. This is essentially the place that you have your schema for each one of the chains that you've created. You can now, if you'd like, go in and enter in the specific variant that you would like to use.
Sweet.
Like that. And so you can just actually enter this in. So you have to live, but you can start to play around with it. We will build a UI around this in the future if people are really liking this as a functionality. And it's pretty simple. This is in the release notes from a how to use it, but you just enter in the platform, the executor, and then the variant number that you want it to run. And that's it.
Nice. That is nice. Thank you.
Yep. And then the last thing I will add on terms of things I forgot to mention is the operator API, which almost everything you've seen us do here is available through the API. And there's a doc page in here you can search for, and you will get all of the different endpoints. We actually wrote a new API on top of operator that you can use for 1.5 that is structured and consistent. Sam on the call here did a lot of work in this category to make sure that this API we have, which is you see any endpoint with v1 in front of it, this is the new API that was developed to be hopefully very consistent for people to use. Other questions?
Well, if nobody has one, I have another one for the publisher ones. Is that also heavily? Did that get a big overhaul, or is it just my old one will still work?
Yep. Lewis, you want to take a run at publishers?
So the publishers, for the most part, they should work. You're gonna have to make a few adjustments in order to, if you have custom publishers, you're gonna have to make a few adjustments because like we've changed the way that publishers are, plugins in general are actually stored. So before there were HTML files with like an init or init plugin block and all that kind of stuff. We've gone away with a lot of that stuff. So now the plugins are just plain JavaScript, which is going to be a lot easier, I think, for a lot of people because you basically have it all inline. So there's going to be some minor formatting things you'll have to update, but for the most part, the rest of it should work fine. Do we have an example publisher available? David, do you know if we're going to make any of the publishers that we're planning on releasing available as community plugins?
Yep. Vector is open source.
Okay. Yeah, so you'll be able to reference the Vector plugin as like as a reference implementation of how our new plugin architecture works. But also, if you want, like we can just hop offline and I can walk you through really quickly all the necessary changes that we need to make in order to make your existing plugins forward compatible with 1.5.
Awesome, thanks.
Yeah, and the guide is in here in the docs as well. You'll find the how to add a plugin with some good information.
Great, appreciate it.
One on that note, we are going to be hosting. This is the first time we've done this as well. We'll be hosting 1.4 and 1.5 simultaneously at least a 6-week period. So people should have plenty of time to kind of weigh both of them, do any sort of transfers between them. So you'll see that as an optional upgrade once we do the major release for 1.5. If you're using 1.4, you'll get that upgrade, notification that you typically get. It will be optional, so you can cancel it and not use it, and 1.4 will remain active for at least 6 weeks after 1.5 comes out. Other questions? All right, I think we're good. So I would say everybody that is in the pre-release camp, look for a note in Discord tomorrow from Robert. Otherwise, thanks for joining, and reach out to any of us on the call or in Discord if you have any additional questions.
Yeah, thanks for sharing, guys. It's a great update.
Totally. Thank you. All right, see you guys.